Best Friends Poems for Ann Staley. For all the hours we read and wrote poetry with students, occasionally their parents, and other teachers in schools, libraries, and firehouses in Huntington, LeGrand, Lincoln City, Newport, Langlois, McMinnville, Cleveland High School, Monmouth, along with conference presentations in Ashland, Eugene, Bend, and Portland, including several amazing poetry reading and writing circles that grew up in your presence like joyful gardens. Together we found the ways to help us all, young and mature poets, find important notes for poems. The thinking on paper we all do together that can save our lives, teach us how to survive in this imperfect and sweet world. Also, we learn from one another your confidence in every writer's ability to enrich her life and the lives of others by sharing her heart. You taught me this confidence over and over. Mil gracias for all these generous lessons. Your loving spirit will always be with me every time I sit alone or with others holding a journal in hand. And then thinking about ways to stay in touch, I have conversations with my mother, bless her, who I was only 17 when she conceived me, which is a very brave thing to do, I think. I would not have ventured that at 17 or similar, start a family. And I stay in touch with her, and I was thinking about how that works, and now I'm studying with the Contemplative Studies program at OSU, and we talk about ways to continue loving people who've left us. Perhaps cultivating continuous love. Contemplative traditions invite us to continue extending loving kindness and deep love to a person after their departure, right along with our grieving their embodied absence. This continued softening of our heart for a loved one allows us to celebrate and grow our love for them and for others. And of course, we don't know how this extended compassion may be apprehended by the departed in their current home beyond suffering. Continuing our love for the departed provides positive joy to our softening heart and allows us to grieve bravely in this growing love. We're able to celebrate gratitude in this still vibrant love for our deceased loved one, life partner, parent, child, or other close friend and companion. What quiet ease there. And I'd like to kind of end here with celebrating one of Ann's ideas that was very successful, I think. In the many years of fireweed publication, which often happened right next door with Courtney and assembling the electronic version. Ann's idea was, well, what if we had an issue that was all student poetry from clear across the state? And happily, a few of the subscribers, the regular subscribers, read through the whole edition. This was 1997 spring, and said, you know, I didn't realize it was all student poetry until I'd read the whole. And I came back and looked at the cover and you know, the forward, just because the poems were so fine. So I'd like to read one of those, and it's by a poet named Megan Lucas, who in 1997, when we assembled this, was a senior at Seaside High School. Going to the dump. A line of trucks with their beds full and cars with their back seats stuffed are in front of us and behind us. A Saturday afternoon sort of adventure. It's best when there are lots of people. I hop out of the truck Dad borrowed from Chuck Kearney to direct him so he doesn't go down into that big hole. Men with paint-splattered torn jeans and faded t-shirts with sweaty armpits shovel leaves and sour garbage off their tailgates. Dad gets up there to do the same thing, but our leaves are prettier, and our garbage is neat. I noticed Mom threw one of my favorite shirts away, but too late. Dad has it on the end of his swinging shovel. I get close to the edge and wonder where it all goes. The pink bicycles with white streamers on the handles, the lawn chairs with ripped seats, and the mushy garbage. Surprisingly, I like the smell. It takes a while to get used to, but it has that important kind of smell. The kind that means there are a lot of neat things down there. I want to go down and see if anyone accidentally threw away a swing set or a wagon. What would happen if a little girl fell in there? The men, so into scraping the leaves out of the corners of their truck beds, would probably just dump them right on top of her, and she would live in there forever, eating the garbage and riding the broken bikes.
Hi everybody, my name's Bar Scott, and my husband Brent Bruiser and I are sort of new to Corvallis. We moved about a year before COVID. And the first person we met was Courtney, who came over to welcome us to the neighborhood. And everything's grown from there. I did some reading from Ann's books last night to see what to read today, and I just couldn't quite swing it today. So I'm going to read things that I think she would love. From her beloved Mary Oliver first. From the Book of Time. I rose this morning early as usual and went to my desk. But it's spring, and the thrush is in the woods, somewhere in the twirled branches, and he is singing. And so now I am standing by the open door, and now I am stepping down onto the grass. I am touching a few leaves. I am noticing the way the yellow butterflies move together in a twinkling cloud over the field. And I am thinking, maybe just looking and listening is the real work. Maybe the world, without us, is the real poem. I love that. And this, Brent and I discovered in the Sun magazine by Philip Terman, The Absence That Was the Tree. Two men are cutting the dead maple down, limbs and branches first, and the trunk in sections, all the pieces scattered in piles on the ground out of which it grew. It's been released from its enormous weight. It's given us this gift of a new view. Now the church in the woods across the road can stare back at us through where it stood and labored to guard our privacy. The regions of the sky the branches divided have merged back again into their undefined whole. All the nests have come crashing down. No longer will we hear bird song from that particular quarter. It will not serve as orientation or point of discussion. We remark about the extra light, the new distance its absence will afford, the extra breezes traveling through the opened gate. Death has a way of allowing us to see beyond where the body formerly stood. But we have come to love that body more than the space revealed behind it. All winter long we'll hack the remnants even smaller, so they will fit our stove, where the tree will warm us in its next life. When it says farewell, it will be as smoke on the air. I really miss Ann a lot. Thank you for coming today.
Hi, my name is Cindy Graff. I met Ann in the fall of 1990, almost 32 years ago. And one of the things that Hester said in her introduction really struck me. She said something about Ann's best friends. I think one of the main things that I came to know about Ann is that she could make you feel that you were her best friend. Whether it was in the confessional poems that she wrote, or in your presence, or when she wrote you a note or wrote you a letter, we were all her best friends. If you read her book, the first one, Primary Sources, the dedication in that book has, I'm sure, 100 names in it. And those of us who were mentioned there said, Ann, we were so surprised that we were in the dedication to your book. And she said, well, who knows if I'll ever write another one? So I have to fit them all in, We all felt that way, that she had a way of making you feel that you were her best friend. And I think that's a talent, but I think more than that, I think that that's inborn of the heart. I loved Ann's poems, especially the ones about writing. And one of the favorite ones for me that she wrote was from the book Afternoon Sky, Harney Desert, and it's called Life Studies. So I'm in a writing group with Bar and Steve, and one of the things we do is we take poems and we take a line or an image from poems that we use as prompts, and we write to that as inspiration. So I'm going to read you Ann's poem first, and then I'll read you a poem I wrote from one of the lines of her poem. Life Studies by Ann Staley. No one told us we had to study our lives. Many people do not, and are astonished to discover that others of us do. It is a different kind of intelligence, to look from above or from afterward, and then wonder what really happened that summer afternoon in 1953. Did I really say that to my father? Is this the love I prayed for and then received? I am relieved that I don't have children, because these kinds of questions would have to be engaged again and again and again. I like studying my own life, answering the questions in poems, but I also learn by studying others' lives, Virginia Woolf's, or Emily's, or Billy Collins', their words revealing and instructive. Today, I wrote a list poem, names of poems I did not write. But each title gave away one-line versions of those poems. Writing about not writing them was writing them after all. Here is a story about yesterday. I talked on the phone with someone I love. The conversation saddened me once again. I wrote a poem about the experience, and today it is raining. So in response to that poem, I wrote one called No One Told Us. I wonder if other people study their lives the way that writers do, examining the details in search of enlightenment, joy, or regret. Many I know just do not seem that curious. They act and move on, never taking stock of motive, impulse, will, or inclination. After all, what's done is done, and there is no sense in belaboring the point. Is there? The past is past, unless or until it isn't. Why should life be a constant inner dialogue, a series of questions, some with answers not worth the energy or the pain it took to ask? Where is the value in second-guessing how we reacted, what we said to whom, the colors we chose? How does it help to think about thinking, to retrace the way we arrived at that place, made that decision, came to that conclusion? Those who write, observe, note, pay attention, ask, what did I learn from living that experience, reading that book, talking to that person? What others view as our vocation, we call instinct. No one told us we had to study our lives. We just know.
The poem I submitted of Ann's is called Portals, and I forgot to say that I'm Jerri Otto. Sorry. So Ann pulled me into her writing circle probably about 30 years ago, I would say, in the 90s sometime. And we spent a lot of time writing together, driving to writing groups and writing events together, shopping together, eating together, snacking, having tea together, doing a lot of life's wonderful things together. And Ann was always this sort of beautiful, lively, vivid person who had lots of ways of being a friend. So one of the things in looking back at her poetry in this last year or so, and reading a lot of it, I realized that a lot of her poetry deals with things that I thought I was kind of dealing with on my own. For instance, exploring meditation and mindfulness and things like that. And I suddenly noticed so many of those things in her poetry that I hadn't really paid attention to before. So that's one thing. Also, she introduced me to a lot of artists other than writers and poets who she always loved art, and I know she frequented the art center here, but also we drove to art galleries in other parts of the state to see things. I guess I'll start with one of the poems that I noticed here that was about one of the displays that we went to see once in Salem. The display was by James Lavador, who is an Oregon artist, landscape artist, and Native American. It's called Umatilla Outflow, and the epigraph is, "The land is my teacher," James Lavador. In the 9-patch grid, a plateau star appears in red and white. At the center, a penny-sized moon held by foggy sky. The horizon shifts and tilts in cobalt, then magenta, puce, sunspot. Above, blue, mountain sediment, stillness at the center. A forest burns, black skeleton trees, sooty smoke, orange flame. The triptych hollow, a fiery blaze of fractured upheaval. Frost silences the world from the far ridge to foreground boulders. White mica reveals, conceals a safe location, mountain storehouse. Rocks and river, tide, sky, and memory. Compounded along with Coltrane, the physicist's flow, and fingering instability. The past laid open as evidence, traces of movement, infinite movement, what's there balanced by the spirit of what is not. Returning to the panels, their jewel-like color, wiping, raking, layering, she remembers her river, what the paintings say.
As Jerri was, or actually, as you've all talked about, being invited by Ann into a writing group, I got to meet her through Oregon Writing Project. But just recently, a couple of years ago, she sent me a letter, and in it were little small samples of writing I had done in Oregon Writing Project. So I know her intent was to remind me that I was a writer. And so it was really fun. And I got to talk to her about that, that reflection of like, oh yeah, this is pretty good. So, she's always encouraging. But one thing I love about Ann Staley is her sense of humor. And it shows up over and over again. I wanted to read a piece entitled Another Laundromat Story. And I'm not sure, a prose poem or a little part of an essay, but it's laid out differently. All right. This is good. Another laundromat story. What do you know about physics, he asked. My answer, nothing. Didn't matter in the least. He went on to talk about the recent Nobel laureates in physics and their theories refuting quantum mechanics, and about a trio of them who predicted a one-atom-thick graphene object in space that has since been located and photographed by the Spitzer telescope, the very same one that photographed the Peony Nebula I was asking my friend Jim about a couple of days ago. This stranger smelled a little when he got close, the smell of someone who hadn't showered recently, gesticulating, maybe ranting. When he loaded his laundry into the dryers, there was no sorting, just a jumble of colors and textures and 10 minutes on high for each. I like to go to the laundromat for just these kinds of encounters, though this man seemed on edge. I believe my pupils were dilated when I walked outside to the car. Plus, I had to return after a meeting to get my things from the dryer. I hoped he wouldn't be there. That is, I hoped he didn't do folding. She's so good, she's so good. This one's a little bit different. I notice everybody who's up here is like their hand is shaking, starting with Steve. It's funny, because we love her, we love her, we want it to be really good. Okay, this one's called Holiness and the Daily Round. A friend is living in the rural Southwest, dry landscape, prickly, thorny plants, and poverty, says a mutual friend. Not a getaway like Ashland or Sisters, more like moving out beyond Lakeview, moving to Glide or Hebo. What is the draw of so far away? I understand some of what she seeks. I think of Thomas Merton's Holiness and the Daily Round, and deconstruct my own faraway life, calendar filled with meetings and phone call moments? Is there holiness in the headlines, in checking in with Ask Amy, with the turning on sound of a laptop coming to life, with the water routine for the geraniums? I sit across the cafe table from a student, her beauty of holiness. Whatever assists us into the now is the holiness we need. I eat an oatmeal cookie, lift my teacup, feel its warmth, move this pen across the page. These words aren't holy, but the little nudge that moves the pen surely is. So awesome. Okay, and one more just because we love it, and it's just a favorite. Reasons for loving postcards. Because they require postage stamps. Because in the mail they are a surprise. Because someone else can send them too. Because they are mailed from far away, even exotic places. Because the skies are always blue, the sunset's magenta, it might be heaven. Because they are all the same size. Because they don't require an envelope. Because they begin with a salutation, dear Anne, and end with love.
My name is Barbara Clausen, and I'm a member of the Birdsong Poetry Group. And Erica Scholl gathered us together, I think it was 12 years ago or so, Erica? Something like that. And Anne was in our group, or we were in Anne's group. I think one thing about when you go to a celebration of life, you never realize the fullness of a person's life until you actually are at their celebration of life. And then we kind of all realized, oh my goodness, we were with the Queen of Poetry. And we didn't really realize it because Anne was a very humble person, and it was all about the poetry. And so I have a poem to read to you from one of our members, Linda Chisholm, and she was not able to be here, but she wanted this poem to be read for Anne. It's called Question for Our Anne. We were blessed to have you join the uncharted poets of our group. Yet you faithfully showed up, shared your prolific poems book after book, and treated us as equals. When did you get your peace, your contentment? I can still imagine that smile your true love described on your deathbed day after day, as content as a babe after feeding and a bath. Because you never complained. Your home was a work of art. Even a plate of cookies displayed more elegancy than sunset or gourmet. The yellow daffodils did not quite come up this year, seemed to be waiting in your deep green for you to settle down. Often you wrote of faith, of afterlife, like the afterlife of rain, its faith in the afterlife, like the black angel whom you swear said, keep on with your mysterious and complicated story, like, this quiet will encourage listening to your soul. Yet you would say there is no God. I'm curious, what would you say now? And then I wanted to read a poem that I wrote to Anne, a dear Anne. You have made a difference in this world. I just heard. We can't do anything about the length of our lives, but we can do something about the depth of our lives. You have done just that. Your love of words has taught people to listen closely to the ordinary and the extraordinary. You have taught us to see with our hearts, compassionately, honestly, in great detail, and in one breath. You have taught us that words can be the window of the soul, the voice of the oppressed, the hope of youth, lessons of the aged, the anger of the forgotten, and the love of the passionate. Your words have been pressed, inked, opened up, valued, pondered, studied, giving beauty and understanding to students of the past and friends of the present. You have taught us to respect, appreciate, and value the words of others as well as our own words. Will you be immortal? Oh yes, of this I am sure. You have written countless poems, stories, and prose. Just as we are all members of the Dead Poets Society, we practice immortality when we read, bring up the past, and smile at the love of our words.
I think I've met you all.
The middle here.
So I'm just going to read a poem of Ann's, one I particularly like. Willamette Valley, late March. Winter rain in the Cascades, days and nights of its arriving on Pacific winds, and as cool mists were piling up, gunmetal clouds along the ridges. If you come to this western valley, prepare for wet blessings. 28 kinds of moss and lichen, rust, moisture-soaked ferns, puddles outside your doorway, a succession of umbrellas you lose and find, and for lost and found days. You stay inside with a steaming cup and the book you've been meaning to read, the one your brother sent for last year's birthday. At night, when the cars and people settle, when the cats are sleeping on our laps, and there is nothing you can do to avoid your life, the ghosts, the voices, your imperfect self. Take comfort in the sound of rain, the great privacy of water falling, its belief in gravity, its faith in the hereafter.